How did Reading Rainbow come about, and did you expect it to be so important to so many people?
The original idea came from a teacher, a woman named Twyla Liggett, who made her way into public broadcasting and worked at a station in Nebraska, GPN, the Great Plains Network, out of Lincoln. The idea was to address what teachers call the summer slide. When a child is learning how to read and they take that summer vacation of 3 months or so, their reading and comprehension skills suffer. This was in the 80s. The first episode of Reading Rainbow aired June 6th, 1983. In the 80s, it was no secret where our nation's children were spending an inordinate amount of time in front of the TV set. And so the idea was to meet them where they were and take them where we wanted them to go. To use this very powerful technology of television to encourage a love of the written word.
What was it like when you were deciding how you wanted to be structured, what you wanted to, how you wanted to go into households every day?
Well, the idea, actually, of using television to promote literature was fairly radical. Back in the day, there was a raging debate in educational circles, will TV rock the minds of America's children? I hear the same conversation going on these days with digital technology and tablet computers. I like to say that all media is educational. The question is, what are we teaching?
Content, right?
It is content. It's all about content.
I'm sure you get asked a lot about children and getting them to read, helping them enjoy read. You can't force someone to love reading, but you can certainly foster it.
You can absolutely foster it. When people ask me, how do I get my child to read more, I generally ask them 2 questions. Number 1, how often do your children see you reading? You see, I was one of the lucky ones. I grew up in a household where reading was like breathing. My mother, Irma Jean Christian, and whenever I get an opportunity, y'all, to speak my mother's name in front of people, I do. I say that I am the man I am because she is the woman that she is. My mother was an English teacher, and a social worker, and a single mom, and a voracious reader. To this day, my mother's 81 years old, has 3 books going constantly for her own reading enjoyment. So I got that example as a child, that reading was a normal, natural part of the human experience. I also ask people, do you know what your child's passions are? Because I have found that it is our passions that drive our reading tastes and desire. And if you can tap into a child's passion, you are halfway home. If your child loves superheroes, then damn it, buy your kid comic books.
So sports, dance, architecture, what they like. And of course, that leads to, I guess, another part, to find out what your child's passionate about. Conversation, right?
Conversation, absolutely. It is really the key. And I think as human beings, we are eager to share what we're passionate about, so it really doesn't take much pride to discover what that trigger is going to be in a child.
Conversation in the family or with caregivers about what you're reading, and the ability to talk about what you're reading?
Absolutely. You know, storytelling is probably the most powerful device in civilization because it's the one activity that we engage in that absolutely demands we engage our imagination. And our imaginations are the most powerful tool we possess as a species. As a child, I read a lot of science fiction books. I'm a huge science fiction fan. It was rare, not often, for me to encounter heroes in the pages of those science fiction novels, Kyle, who looked like me. So Gene Roddenberry's vision of the future was one that embraced me, and so I embraced it. And to have grown up and become a part of that storytelling mythos, I don't have words to express what that means to me on a personal level. Gene Roddenberry was a genuine visionary and a master storyteller. And I believe that there's some child that watched those original episodes of Star Trek grew up, became an engineer, a designer, and developed a piece of technology that is more common than the toaster. By show of hands, who has ever seen or seen someone use a flip cell phone? Right? Those images of Captain Kirk reaching back to that Velcro place on his hip because there are no pockets in the future. I'm here to tell you that. No place to put your hands in the future, no pockets. But Kirk would whip that thing out and he'd flip it open and he'd call Scotty, right? Well, that child grew up, and what we focus our imagination on is what we tend to manifest in this realm. That's how it works. Human beings are manifesting machines. It is what we do naturally. We do it unconsciously.
It sounds like you aim to inspire, whether it's reading Rainbow or whether it was working with Gene Roddenberry's vision.
As David said, we're all teachers in my family. You know, my mom's a teacher, my older sister is a teacher, my son is in education. He's also a basketball coach. Nieces, I mean, if you're a Burton, that's pretty much the family business. My father was a soldier, my mother was an educator. I did not want to go into the Army.
Well, mention Star Trek. Did you feel any pressure? Because that had been a beloved show for 79 episodes and 3 seasons. The film series. Was there any pressure among you and the cast and crew that you had to live up to something?
Not that I discerned. Look, I'll tell you the story of how I got the job on Star Trek. I believe that everything happens for a reason. Even when in the moment it is difficult to discern what that reason might be. I did back in the early 80s, about 80, 81, 82. I did a terrible TV movie called Emergency. It was a vehicle starring Sarah Purcell. Anybody old enough to remember Real People? Yeah. Sarah Purcell from Real People. Well, they wanted to make her a TV star, and so they cast her in this movie about an emergency room, but they surrounded her with really, really good actors: Conchata Ferro, Gary Lockwood, Gary Frank, Penny Peiser. The cast was tremendous, and the producer of this terrible TV movie was a man named Robert H. Justman. Now, I knew from my days of watching the original series that Robert H. Justman was an associate producer on Star Trek and worked side by side with Gene Roddenberry. So I pumped this man every day for stories. Tell me what it was like. I was just really, really just tell me. Well, flash forward to 1987, and Bob is working with Gene at Paramount on rebooting the Star Trek franchise. And I get a call from Bob Justman. He says, I know you've never done a television series before, but we're doing a new Star Trek series, and I know you're a big fan. Would you consider coming over and talking to the people here? And I only had one question, and that was, is Gene involved? You see. And so knowing that Gene was involved, it didn't matter to me what anybody else said. I felt we had an even money shot of being a good show. The fact that eventually we overcame some of that prejudice that people held against a new incarnation of Star Trek and won over people's hearts, that you can't control. However, the show itself, I figured if Gene was involved, the storytelling, at least, would be top-notch.
And it was.
And it was.
It was, very much so. Most of us first became familiar with you in Roots. And you talked about a seminal book, Taylor's book, and then the television series, which is still landmark. Was there awareness among cast and crew that you were making something landmark as you were making it?
There was certainly an awareness that what we were doing was unusual, rare, special. You have to remember, Roots was my first job. It was my first professional audition. I was a 19-year-old drama student at the University of Southern California. My very first day as a professional actor, Cicely Tyson played my mother, Dr. Maya Angelou played my grandmother. seen on television and in films my entire life. Moses Gunn, Harry Rose, Jitu Kumbuka, Lou Gossett. And in the makeup room, every morning, the vibe was so amazing. And all of these veterans were talking about the fact that for pretty much the first time in their storied careers, they had finally a piece of material that they felt they could really sink their souls into. So on that level, yes, we knew that it was special. What was very much unknown was how it would be received. Stan Margulies, the producer of Roots, the line producer, used to say that in a country where 80% of the population is white and 20% is black, how would the story of slavery go over where the blacks were the heroes and the whites were the villains? And the reason that Roots was broadcasted 8 consecutive nights originally was that ABC, the broadcast network, was unsure as to how Roots would be received. And they figured, unlike Rich Man, Poor Man, which was broadcast in weekly installments, if we put this all on 8 consecutive nights, if it tanks, we'll be over and done with it in a week. We can wipe our hands and walk away. Well, the final episode of Roots is still the most watched episode of television in the history of the media. America, as it turns out, embraced this.
Yes, they did. I was in my mid-teens, in perhaps, by percentage, the whitest part of this country, Baxter County, Arkansas.
Baxter County,
Arkansas.
All right.
At that point, 100% white. Everybody was talking about it at school. It was a phenomenon. What was that like as the nights went forward and the ratings grew every night?
Wow. It was. It's difficult to describe. It was like being at the center of a cycle. I had really no real expectations. The David Wolper, the producer of Roots, and all of the people in his organization, I had seen it. The first time I saw Roots was at a screening in Washington, D.C. I thought it was incredibly good. I was really happy to be working. It was the first time anybody had paid me to do what I wanted to do. And I had expected to go right back to USC and continue my studies. That first night, I was in Los Angeles, and I watched it with one of my college friends. And then I drove up to Northern California to watch night 2 with my mom. She lives in Sacramento. The morning after night 2, I was recognized for the first time in the supermarket, and my life has literally never been the same from that moment until now.
The produce aisle.
It was literally at the checkout counter, and my face was on the cover of the TV Guide magazine. So it was, I was toast from jump.
You mentioned some things here that take a little bit of courage, maybe, for lack of a better term, a leap of faith. Talking to the associate of Gene Roddenberry, 19, auditioning for what will become a major network show. Using television to talk about literacy to children. What kind of confidence or courage did you have in these spots, and did that come from home?
I don't know that I would call it necessarily confidence. I think that I think it's been said that God protects the innocent, you know. And I think that when I was that young, I was fairly naive. I believed very much in the power of miracles, that there were no limits. I was raised by a woman who instilled in me a value that said there are no limits, save the ones I impose upon myself. I believed that I lived in a world that had limitless opportunities available to me, and I just assumed, that I could do whatever I wanted. That's how I was raised.
Do you try to project that in the projects you take on, the roles you take?
I suppose there's a subtle aspect of messaging in that regard. Yeah. I try and share that point of view with my audience whenever possible, certainly on Reading Rainbow. I mean, the idea that you can go anywhere and be anything, that has been a major part of the message. I hear all the time from people who grew up on the show, adults now, who are beginning to have their own children, that Reading Rainbow was not just responsible for fostering them a love of reading and literature, but it really opened the world up to them and showed them the possibilities that were out there, and even, I mean, I meet people, you know, I'm a beekeeper because of that episode of Reading Rainbow, or I'm a writer, or I learned English as a second language watching Reading Rainbow. I mean, the impact of the show, I get feedback on that every day of my life.
And that comes with a little responsibility, right?
Well, I believe, again, see, I believe that this is the medium of moving pictures and sound, right? And the larger web that we have woven that connects us globally as a species, as a race of human beings. This technology is the most powerful tool in the history of civilization. And I believe that everybody who produces content has a responsibility for that content which they produce. Now, in a free market economy, there's room for all kinds of things. And I get that. My intention, and it is an intention, is always to use this medium to the highest, best possible outcome for the most people imaginable. Because we can. That's my point of view. That's what I get up in the morning to do. That's why I get up in the morning. It's what I believe I was meant to do.
You're not afraid of technology.
I love technology. I do. Damn it, I'm the chief engineer of the Starship. You walked right into that,
There are people here who probably my age or older sometimes read handwriting because of some of the things you said about access is out there to everything now, it seems,
right?
And that can be dangerous.
Sure, we must use discernment, right? Discernment. It's one of my favorite words. A great visual for discernment is a knife. I love knives. I collect knives. A knife is the perfect metaphor for discernment because a knife can be a weapon or a tool. It is the intention of the wielder that determines its appropriate use. One must have discernment in order to use a knife appropriately in any given situation. So unless we have discernment in the use and utilization of this very powerful, very engaging technology, we're sunk, we're lost. Technology in and of itself is not the bad guy. It is our unbridled use of technology that will get us into trouble.
Well put.
Huzzah.
Because of the access now, some of us lament that there is not a shared experience like there once was. You mentioned the ratings at the finale of Roots got. That's never going to happen again, especially for scripted television.
That's why we gather at events like this.
Very good.
What about MASH?
There was a time, I think, this might have predated when I was reading, but there was a time when you could go to a party, or if there was a gathering like this, a certain percentage of us had read the same contemporary book.
Sure.
May not be the case now.
No. But the cultural references we have aren't necessarily literary anymore. The popular culture references mostly come from television. And that's okay because I think that we are currently living in a golden age of storytelling on television. I think that the work being done on television is much more superior to that which is being done in the world of feature films. I think the storytelling is just extraordinary on TV these days. There's just so much great television. It is difficult, impossible really, to watch it all.
We're in a library, so when we come back, when you're looking for something to read, author, subject title, or do you ever just take a gamble?
Again, I gravitate towards science fiction. Octavia Butler is my favorite science fiction author. Love me some Octavia Butler. Right now I'm reading Game of Thrones, and I'm reading Game of Thrones because I was inspired to pick up the book because my wife and daughter had been watching the television series from the very beginning, and every Sunday when a new episode would come on, I'd have to leave the room. And finally, I got tired of leaving the room. And so this past May, I binge watched all of the episodes in 2.5 weeks. And I thought, wow, if the movie that they make for me is this good, I can't wait to see the movie I make in my head when I read the books. And so I am deep into the story now. I'm absolutely loving it.
Have you written George R.R. Martin a letter or a note or sent an email and said how much you like it?
No.
But so you had this communal event with the family over the program.
Yes, exactly. And I think that that's just a fact of the modern age, right? I'm happy to report that communing is still done around the activity of storytelling. I think it's storytelling that really defines us. It helps us find our place in the cosmos. Storytelling is how we communicate our hopes, our dreams, our desires, our goals, our aspirations. It is how we communicate to one another who we are, why we're here, and the importance of moments both large and small in the pursuit of being human.
When you were a child and as you became an adult, science fiction mentioned, other places you hear, read, or see stories that were inspirational?
Well, I grew up a Catholic.
Okay, so yeah.
I was raised a Catholic, not because my mother was one, but because she knew that parochial education was the best one available for her 3 children. There is a lot of obvious storytelling in all religion. The Catholic liturgy, the Catholic Mass, is very dramatic. There's a lot of mystery and magic. Watch me turn this host into the body of Christ, this wine into His blood. There's real pomp and circumstance and a lot of flash. And I think that was part of. And I studied for the priesthood for 4 years when I was younger, and I think that the theatrical nature of the Mass was one of the things that really drew me.
Was that when you were a teenager? Or?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I entered the seminary when I was 13.
Wow. When did acting become a passion?
I went to St. Pius X Seminary in Gulf, California, and had a teacher, a man named LeVar Burton, who was a layman. He was neither a brother nor a priest. He took no orders. And Lee was he was the drama coach, and he was also the English teacher and the philosophy teacher. It was a very small school. And what Lee had me reading in my second year there really sort of blew my mind, and I really thought it rearranged how I saw myself fitting in to the world. My worldview shifted, and I started looking around for what I wanted to do. I decided to become a priest when I was 8, and I pursued it single-mindedly, against the advice of almost everyone. But I have always believed that that life is it's like a controlled fall. Life, it's like walking is a controlled fall. Life is very much like that. If you take the step that's in front of you, the next step will always reveal itself. And that's how I've tried to live my life. You know, if you take that first step, your leg is going to come jutting out there and prevent you from falling on your face. Trust me, I mean, you do it every day. So I try and take the step that's in front of me in life and let the next step come as it may. It's something that I've learned over time. I used to be the sort of person who needed to know the end of the story before it even began. I mean, literally, I would start a book and turn to the end, read the last paragraph, and then begin.
You wanted to be somewhat anchored?
I needed to know how it ended before I began. That was my approach to life. I thought I needed to know where I was going at all times. I thought that was my safety net. That was my security. My belief was, if I just know how this is going to turn out, it's all going to be okay. What I learned is that it doesn't leave much room for a mystery of life. It doesn't leave much room for process. That oftentimes that which you cannot anticipate is the thing that has the most meaning.
Don't let me put words in your mouth, but it sounds like, I know there are a lot of younger people in the audience, you don't have to know exactly what your last paragraph is going to be when you're 10,
No.
17, 27, 40.
Not at all. Not at all. Take the step that's in front of you. The next step will reveal itself.
Speaking of which, you are well, and I think that came through in Reading Rainbow because I rewatched some of these just to get ready. It seems like
Which episodes did you watch?
Oh, and this, I have to admit that I was in college when they started, so I had missed the phenomenon. And I'll tell you, if you think millennials are jaded, mention that LeVar Burton's coming to town because all pretense goes away. I'm very, very excited. It's very exciting. But it seems as though, and this is not an easy thing to do, I think, you're right there with us. Maybe I'm wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, but we thought you were there with us, right? I mean, the camera's gone. How does that happen? You just believe what you're doing?
When I took on the task of doing Reading Rainbow, it was after having done a couple of seasons of another children's television series on PBS called Rebop, which was produced out of WGBH in Boston. And Rebop was a half-an-hour show, and it was terrific. It was profiles, 12-minute profiles of kids, and in each episode there were 2 profiles, and you'd have maybe a profile of a kid who grew up in Montana and lived on a ranch, and another kid who lived in South America and lived in the favela. So the idea was that we're all we come from varied backgrounds, but there's so much commonality in the human experience. And I thought that was terrific. And one of the things that I learned on that show was they wanted to put the host's dialogue, the wraparounds, on a teleprompter. And I discovered that, or they wanted to use cue cards, and I discovered that my eye line in reading the cue cards was not making contact with the cameraman's. And so I have fairly good memory, and I would just memorize whatever it was I needed to say so that I could make contact with the lens. And I took that with me to the Reading Rainbow experience. And by that time, my son Ian was born, and I just started out really just talking to him through the camera lens. And in the service of that, I think a lot of people felt that I was talking directly to them.
You have managed a career that has been so different, never stereotyped, and touched so many people. There are actors, men and women who haven't been able to do that, but you've just been able to shake off, and it seems so inspirational to so many people in so many different roles.
Well, I'm not one of those guys that can do whatever they want. I'm not a George Clooney. I'm not a Brad Pitt. But I've been really blessed, and I feel like I've taken that which has come my way and done well with it. but I definitely have taken that which has come my way, and I'm grateful.
Is that the philosophy somewhat behind Kickstarter, to get Reading Rainbow in a new generation, in a new way of thinking?
Well, the philosophy behind Kickstarter was we needed to raise money and we weren't getting any traction from the traditional venture capital community. And my daughter, who was 20, Michaela, she insisted that we take a look at this crowdfunding mechanism. Now, I'd been aware of Kickstarter. I knew about it. And, you know, I had seen it grow and mature. The Veronica Mars project was funded, and when Zach Braff raised the money for his movie, Wish I Were There, that got my attention. However, you know, Reading Rainbow is a pretty solid platinum brand, and asking publicly for money was very daunting. And I thought it's very risky, because should we fail, it could be the undoing of this very powerful brand. However, you know, desperate times require desperate measures, and so we took a deep breath and jumped into the deep end.
Yeah. You have a future in public radio fundraising, by the way. So it was wildly successful.
Yeah, beyond our ability to really comprehend. We were looking to raise $1 million in 35 days. Most Kickstarters are 30 days. We figured we'd give ourselves an extra 5 days if we needed it to raise that $1 million. And I woke up on the morning that we launched, and the first thing I saw was the New York Times announcing that Dr. Maya Angelou had passed. And right about that was 6 a.m. in California, and we pushed go on the Kickstarter. And then I got up to take a shower, and I came back and I looked, and the needle hadn't really moved, and I thought, ooh, it's going to be a long month. And then I drove to work, and by the time I got there, the needle had started to move. And I thought, oh, Dr. Maya is up there doing shit. And then it just kept jumping, and for the remainder of the day, we watched the Kickstarter page like it was television, because the number kept changing and kept growing. And then I had a work call. I had to leave the office and go up to the set. I do a television show on TNT called Perception with Eric McCormack. And we were shooting that day on our soundstage up in the north end of the valley. And I went to go to work, and my business partner, Mark Wolf, called me after a couple of hours, and he said, you know, looks like we're going to hit $1 million today. And so they came up, and Mark came up, and Kyle, our director of video operations at the company, and we were all sitting around the computer when that we hit that number, and that was like, it was about 5 o'clock, so we hit $1 million in 11 hours before dinner on day one. We had achieved our goal. No, and let me just say this about that. I believe, and this is true, it is borne out by the numbers, over 105,000 people, more that have contributed to any other crowdfunding campaign, before or since. And it's you all, it's the millennials, it's the folks, the adults now who grew up on Reading Rainbow and felt like this part of their childhood needed to live on. It was all of you who went into your pockets and donated $5 and $10 and $25. Aside from the $1 million pledge that Seth MacFarlane made, the overwhelming majority of the money that we raised was in increments of $40 and below. Wow. So we started the Kickstarter, but it rapidly became a people's movement. And I don't have enough thanks in my heart, because what that said to me is that we sowed those seeds for all of those years, on Reading Radio that we made a difference.
Yeah, it's a testament
In
to the
people's
relationship.
lives.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It also seems to me you do not take yourself too seriously.
Oh, you can't do
I mean, if you've seen the television show Community, we're on that, and you had great fun. I think there's a Funny or Die
Yes.
video with you, playing yourself.
Yes.
You do have a lot of fun with yourself.
If I can't have fun being me, look, my life is amazing. If you ever hear me complaining about any aspect of my life, you have my permission to smack me upside the head. Because I will have lost my mind. I love my life. I absolutely love my life. And really, if I can't have fun, then then there really is no point. I love to laugh, and it's important to be able to laugh at yourself.
Well, in that spirit, I have a two-part silly question then.
Right.
The glasses on Star Trek Next Generation, you still have it?
I do. I have the visor that I wore
The
for
visor, okay.
for 7 seasons and a movie. Yeah.
Were they comfortable?
Neither could I see out of them very well. It's true. On one of these trips, I'm actually going to bring the visor and demonstrate. The visor made it about 80 to 85% of my vision was taken away when I put the visor on. I could not see that. I could not see that. So it made navigating the sets, especially in the first season, really, really difficult. I bumped into everything on the set in the first year, and I believe that the human being is infinitely adaptable, and I just learned how to navigate without seeing my feet. At the end of the day, I do believe, and I get that Rick Berman always maintained that the visor was a shorthand way of communicating the level of sophistication of the technology of the 24th century. And I also believe that it is not fair to cover an actor's eyes. And I also believe that everything happens for a reason. And so I surrendered to that, and I tried to discern what the value in this was. And I definitely believe that it made a better actor out of me. I used to consider that my eyes were my best arrow in the quiver. And I don't anymore. I mean, I know that I have the facility to use my eyes, but I developed a method of communicating energetically and with my voice that that gave people the sense that they knew who Geordi was without seeing his eyes. And I'm pretty proud of that.
What is the joy in having a character that you can explore over 7 years as opposed to a movie role where you might be on the scene for a few weeks or months?
Yeah, it's a remarkable thing because I think most actors, and I don't talk a lot about the process of acting. I don't think it's really of much value. But I do believe that most actors begin in the creation of a character with things that they find similar in themselves. When you're playing a character over a protracted period of time like that, you really have an opportunity to live in that skin to the point where you can pull it on and off at will. I mean, if we were to start filming tomorrow, and I were to put on a spacesuit and be acting with my friends, we would fall into the same rhythms, and it would be absolutely, I mean, one of the geniuses of the last couple of years is we have had an opportunity to spend a lot of time together on the road, the cast of The Next Generation, and we've done several Next Gen reunion events, and they've been great fun for us. Not only do we get an opportunity to hang out and spend some time with the fans, but we get to have dinner at night. And for whatever reason, we have always managed to make one another laugh more than anyone else in our respective lives. And when we are together, it's like we're in junior high school. It's crazy. We are a rowdy bunch, and we love to make one another laugh. And so, you know, I really believe that one of the reasons why the show became as popular as it did is because we really do love one another, and I think that the audience got the sense that these are people who actually genuinely care about each other, and the truth is, we do.
You have a daughter, the one who got you interested in Kickstarter, and her name?
Michaela.
There is a character in the book you have just had published.
Yes, Mika is her nickname, and there's a character in the book, Mika Mouse.
And connection?
Mika Mouse, the character in the book is named after Michaela. She's a huge Disney fan. I mean, my kid is ask her what her favorite thing to do, it would be go to Disney. And she's 20. And we called her Mika Mouse for the first, 12, 14 years of her life. She has a plush Mickey that she has slept with every night of her life for 20 years. It's on her bed at the University of Michigan as we speak.
I think there's nothing wrong with that. The book, and by the way, it's the hardest book to get in Fayetteville as of tonight. Don't go leave her a copy tomorrow. Was it something, I don't know if easy is the right word, but did it just seem organic to write this book?
I knew I would write a children's book. 31 years of promoting other people's children's books. I knew I would write a children's book one day. I wanted to wait until I felt like I had something that I really wanted to say. And a few years ago, we were shooting in Central Park some content for the new Reading Rainbow app. And there was a news story, not unlike today, where there was some person not in their right mind shooting people in some public place. In America, there was an incident today in Canada, in Ottawa, Parliament. And it just seemed to me that we are experiencing more and more of these events these days. And for me, Fred Rogers was that voice that spoke to children about a world that's dominated by adults in a way that they could understand and in a way that gave them a sense of their purpose and their safety and meaning. And I wanted to address myself to the current state of the world and write a book that Fred might have written if he were here. And The Rhino Who Swallowed the Storm, for me, is that book.
Well, so many of us in this room have had a great experience with you talking about reading and introducing us to books through a screen. Wouldn't it be kind of cool if LeVar Burton read us a book here in person?
Yes!
Who wants to hear a story? The book is called The Rhino Who Swallowed the Storm. It's one of my favorite books. And it was written by one of my favorite authors, LeVar Burton. My co-writer was Susan Schaefer Bernardo, and the illustrator is Courtney Fletcher. Both of these women are tremendously talented, and it is my pleasure and a joy to collaborate with both of them. If you have a copy, follow along. In the middle of the morning, Mika Mouse trembled under her blanket. A storm boomed outside of her window. Rain crashed against the glass. Wind rattled the shutters. More than anything else, Mika was afraid of storms. A year before, a powerful hurricane had destroyed her house. "I'm scared, Papa," she said. "We are safe, Mika. This storm will pass soon," said Papa. "Would you like me to read you a story? I know just the one to help you feel better." Mika, love, stories, and Papa's gentle voice soothed in a way that made her forget all about the thunder. Papa opened the book and began. Long, long ago, before there were words, animals roamed in bountiful herds. Little rhinoceros lived happy and free, exploring mountains and meadows, rivers and trees. His world was delightful and chock full of magic until, out of the blue, that magic turned tragic. A storm swept through the valley, turning bright sky to black. A flash flood came raging, no time to react. Lost in the thundering, no time for wondering. Chaos and lightning, fury so frightening. Earthquaking, him shaking, water rumbling, him tumbling. Raggedy, jaggedy, senseless calamity. The storm crashed through his world and tore it apart and took away everything dear to his heart. Rhino was stunned by the terrible scene. Death and destruction all through the ravine. Enraged by the pain of such a great loss, Rhino acted without a thought to the cost. Rhino looked at his world, all tattered and torn, stood out on the ledge, and swallowed the storm. Inside his belly, he felt the storm growing. Inside his head, he heard howling and blowing. Like a tornado, he spun as the storm raged inside, growing bigger and bigger and wider than wide. When he finally stopped, when he regained control, he was at the very bottom of a very deep hole. What do I do? Rhino worried as rain dripped down his face. I'm lost, and I'm lonely, and in such a dark place. At just the right moment, to comfort and guide him, a spider dropped down and dangled beside him. The world up above is shattered and gray, but it's where you belong, so you must find a way to let that storm out and move through your sorrow. You'll find many helpers on the road to tomorrow. Oh, but that hole was dreadfully deep, and the walls around him were slippery, steep. Rhino tried to climb out, but was losing all hope when Kangaroo heard him and threw down a rope. Though Rhino was heavy from the weight of the storm, they towed him right up, got him safe, dry, and warm. We're strong and steady, and always ready. When danger strikes, we hop to it. Fire or flood, snow or mud, when help is needed, we guide you through it. Watching those heroes do what they did best gave Rhino the strength to set off on his quest. That storm he was clutching made him buzzy and blurry. It kept his brain foggy. It filled him with worry. Where do I go? What do I do? How will I ever make it through? After every dark night, there comes a new day. Be kind, do your best, and you'll find a way. Up comes the sun. There are steps to complete. There isn't a map, just follow your feet. Those were the bees. Rhino followed his feet to a wallowing spot where he plopped on a rock and had a deep thought. I'm tired of caging the wind and the rain, exhausted from holding this anger and pain. We're all on this earth to learn and to grow. A wise old tortoise chimed in from below. Allowing yourself to start feeling your feelings is the very first step on the journey toward healing. It doesn't much matter if you're fast or you're slow. If you want to move forward, just trust and let go. Rhino shook and shimmied and stomped in the muck, and just as he'd hoped, that storm came unstuck. At first, one little raindrop leaked out of his eye. Then Rhino let go and had a cry. His tears formed a river that flowed to the sea where a pod of whales swam happy and free. I do feel better, Rhino thought as he drifted. Then up swam a whale and Rhino was lifted. If you ever feel blue, the whale said with a spout, remember to breathe. Breathe in and breathe out. Sing your own song and take it deep, deep, deep. Then rise above with a joyful leap. As he floated home on a gentle wave, Rhino felt calm and strong and brave. His vision was clear like the sky above, and he looked at his world through eyes filled with love. So he thanked the kind spider and the brave kangaroo and all of the others who helped him through. He was glad to know that if he ever lost hope, they'd lend him a hand or throw him a rope. He had journeyed his journey a very long way to find the light in a world turned gray. He'd swallowed a storm with no thought to the cost. He felt all alone, he'd been tumbled and tossed. Life would bring changes, beginnings and ends, but he had faith in himself and faith in his friends. As they curled up together, he felt loved and protected, and he dreamed of a world that was safe and connected. He understood now. It was love that mattered. Love could never be lost. Love could never be shattered. Papa closed the book and gave Nika a hug. I know it was scary when our home was destroyed last winter, said Papa. Bad things happen sometimes, and we can't always control that. But we had lots of helpers, said Nika, just like Rhino did. That's right, little one, Papa said in his gentle way. You're never really alone when bad things happen. There are family, and friends, even people we don't know who are always there to help us through the tough times. And like in all storms, the book ends with a rainbow.
Copy. So, LeVar Burton, thank you so much for coming to Fayetteville in the library.
Let's hear it for Kai, y'all.